"Take it easy," Luke complained, shrugging his arm free of the trooper who was escorting them down the long, narrow stone hallway. As they paced, Luke took the opportunity to study the damp, dripping walls. Some of them showed dark moss. Clearly, the omnipresent moisture of Mimban penetrated the old walls here. "You'd think the Imperial government could have invested some credit in modern quarters," he murmured. "Why?" the sub-officer ahead of them wanted to know, "when the primitives of this world left us such useful structures. A temple, a place of worship, and it's been turned into offices and a prison," the princess declared angrily. "The Empire does what is necessary," the sub-officer observed in a phlegmatic manner which would have gratified his superiors. "I am told this mining is an expensive venture. The Empire is smart enough to save where it is able," he concluded with pride. "That probably extends to your pay and retirement benefits," the princess ventured maliciously. "That's enough talk from the prisoners," the disgruntled sub-officer decided aloud, unhappy with the turn the conversation had taken. They rounded a sharp corner. A network of intersecting diagonal bars formed an unbreakable mesh at the end of the corridor. "Here's your new home," the sub-officer informed them. "Inside you can muse about what the Empire has in store for your future." As the sub-officer passed a palm over the wall on his immediate right, an unbarred ellipsoid appeared in the center of the metal grill. "Move," the trooper next to Luke ordered, prodding him with his rifle. "I was told we were going to have company," Luke ventured, walking toward the empty space with great reluctance. This provoked considerable merriment among the assembled troopers. "You'll find it soon enough," the sub-officer chuckled, "or it'll find you." Once both prisoners stood inside the cell, the sub-officer passed his hand over the photo plate again. And the dematerialized bars reappeared with a solid clank. "Company, he says," one of the retreating troopers echoed, as they walked back up the corridor. They continued laughing among themselves. "For some reason I'm not amused," Luke muttered. Each of the angled bars was as big around as his forearm. He flicked one with a nail and it rang like a bell. "Solid, not tubular," he announced. "This cell was designed to hold more than ordinary people." "I wonder what," the princess gasped, pointed to a far corner and began backing toward the nearest wall. Two massive, hairy mounds lay clustered near the back of the cell, under the single window. The fur moved up and down, indicating it was surrounding something alive. "Easy, easy," Luke instructed, backing close to her and putting both hands on her shoulders. She leaned into him. "We don't know who they are yet." "We don't know what they are," the princess whispered fearfully. "I think they're waking up." One of the huge shapes stood, stretched, let out a grunt like a volcano clearing its throat. It turned and caught sight of them. Luke's eyes bugged. He started toward the figure. The princess put out a hand to hold him back, but he shook it off. "Are you out of your mind, Luke? They'll tear you to pieces." He continued walking slowly toward the waiting figure. It stood little taller than he did, but was built much more massively. Its hair-covered arms reached to the cell floor, the hands dragging on the stone. A long snout protruded from the center of the face, obscuring any mouth. Two huge black eyes stared expectantly at him. "Luke, don't do this, come back here." A querulous growl rumble sounding like an angry underground spring came from the figure Luke was nearing. The princess became quiet, pressed worriedly back against the cold stone wall as she slid toward the farthest corner. Luke eyed the massive creature warily. They had to make friends fast, or he and Leia wouldn't have to worry about getting off Mimban except in fragments. He reached out, touched an arm in a certain way. His eyes never left the jet-black orbs staring into his own. With startling speed, the creature took a backward hop, chittered something. It was several times Luke's weight. Dim light from the sealed illuminators in the cell ceiling shone on cable-like shoulder muscles above those double-length arms. A pair of plate-sized hands reached out for Luke. He responded by uttering something in low tones. Shaking its head, its snout swinging, the creature hesitated, then rumbled again. Luke spoke louder gibberish at it. Reaching out, the beast grabbed Luke with both hands and lifted him off the ground over its head, as if preparing to dash him against the stone floor. The princess screamed. The creature brought Luke close to its body, closer, and planted a wet kiss on each of Luke's cheeks before setting him gently back on the floor. The princess stared in disbelief at Luke's affectionate assailant. "Why didn't it tear your head off? You." She gazed at Luke admiringly. "You talk to it?" "Yes," Luke admitted modestly. "I used to study a lot about certain worlds, back on my uncle's farm on Tatooine. It was my only escape, and educational as well. This," and he indicated the creature resting a massive long arm on his head and shaking him in a friendly fashion, "is a Yuzum. I've heard of them, but this is the first time I've seen one. They're temperamental," Luke told her, "so I thought it would be better to try and make the first greeting ourselves, using what little language I learned." He jabbered at the creature, which chittered back. "It might have killed me somewhere else, but all prisoners are allies, it seems." The Yuzum turned, staggered backward and bumped into the wall. It leaned over and began shaking its still somnolent companion. The second Yuzum rolled over awake and swung angrily at the first. The massive hand missed, instead connecting with the wall hard enough to leave an impression in the rock. Rolling to a sitting position, it started chittering to its waker, holding its head with one hand. "Why?" Leia exclaimed as the realization struck her, "they are both drunk." The second Yuzum finally managed to get to its feet. It growled at her. "No offense," she quickly added. "The one I talk to is called, as near as I can translate it, Hin." That's Key leaning against the wall, wishing to be someplace else. He jabbered at Hin, listened to the reply. "I think he said that they've been working for the Imperial government's operation here, got fed up about a week ago and started breaking things. They've been locked in here ever since. I didn't know the Imperials were hiring non-humans." "Apparently these two didn't have any choice," Luke explained, listening to him. "They don't like the Imperials any more than we do. I've been trying to convince them that all humans aren't like the Imperials. I'm pretty sure I'm succeeding." "I hope so," Leia said, eyeing the massively muscled, long-armed creatures. Both Hin and Key are young, about our age, and not very experienced in Imperial affairs. They signed themselves into, well, I guess you couldn't quite call it slavery, but indentured servitude is too polite a term. When they protested, finally, some mine official waved a lot of documents at them and made jokes. So they took their equipment and started trying to fill in the mine instead of empty it out. According to him, the only reason Grammel didn't have them shot immediately was because each of them does the work of any 3 men and because they were both intoxicated out of their minds. Apparently Yuzum, he added unnecessarily, have long hangovers. Hin believes the Imperials will give them another chance. But he's not so sure he wants one. They're in here because the regular cells won't hold them. Come say hello. The princess hesitated and Luke walked over to her and whispered, "It's okay. I think we could count on them. But better not to tell them who we are." She nodded, walked over and reached out with a hand. It vanished into a hairy paw. Hin chittered at her. "The same, I'm sure," she said, gaining confidence rapidly. Key held and both humans looked to the other Yuzum, who babbled at Luke. "Says someone's been using a mining drill on his head for the past week." Leia began walking away from him, toward the single window. It showed a panorama of mist-obscured lights from the town and was blocked by the same configuration of thick, diagonally placed bars. "I know someone I'd like to take a drill to," she muttered disconsolately. "You mean Hela," Luke declared. "She couldn't and can't do a thing for us. If I were in her situation I'd probably be running, too." Looking over at him, she smiled dazzlingly. "You know that's not true, Luke. You're too loyal and responsible for your own good." Her gaze turned back to the mist-shrouded roofs of the distant town. "If we hadn't lost control of ourselves back in front of the tavern, we wouldn't have attracted the attention of those miners. We wouldn't be here now. It's my fault. He put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Come on, Leia. Princess. This mess was nobody's fault. Besides, it's fun losing control once in a while. She smiled again, thankfully. You know, Luke, the rebellion is lucky to have you. You're a good man. Yeah. He turned away. Lucky for the rebellion. There was a chattering from across the cell. Leia eyed Luke questioningly. Key says someone's coming, he translated. Together with the two Yuzum, they turned their attention to the corridor. Footsteps approached rapidly. Several stormtroopers appeared, an anxious Grammel leading them. He seemed to relax a little on catching sight of his prisoners. You're both unharmed. Luke nodded. Good, he declared, visibly relieved. His gaze traveled to the Yuzum and back again to Luke. I see you're sharing your cell agreeably, so far. I'm pleased. I was afraid I'd have to move you, but if the Yuzum can tolerate your presence, then I think you should stay. You'll be more secure in here. It develops that someone else has expressed an interest in your case. Luke looked blankly at the princess, who stared back with equal lack of comprehension. Yeah, one of the enforcers back on Sarkarpus, I'll bet, Luke essayed boldly. Not exactly. Another of those enigmatic half-smiles that sent chills down Luke's spine. An Imperial representative is coming here to question you personally. That's enough for me. I know when to stand aside. So I'm not going to contact our sources on Sarkarpus until he tells me to. Oh, was all Luke could find to say. He was at once pleased and concerned, pleased, because their little tale of being escaped criminals from Sarkarpus was apparently going to avoid scrutiny for a little while longer, concerned, because he couldn't imagine anything Grammel might have told someone that would intrigue an Imperial representative. Where might they have slipped and revealed something? Why would an Imperial representative be so interested in us, he asked, fishing for information. That's what I'd like to know, Grammel replied. He walked to stand next to the bars. I don't suppose you'd care to tell me. I don't know what you mean, Luke responded, stepping back from the bars. I could make you tell me, Grammel growled, but I've been ordered to. He had to force himself away from the bars. To leave you strictly alone. Don't let that make you confident. I am of the impression that this representative, and he is a very important one, will have his own plans for you, and that they will be more unpleasant than anything I in my simple way could devise. You or some Imperial officer, Luke shrugged, affecting the casual attitude of the streetwise. It's all the same to us, so long as we don't get sent back to Sarkarpus. Wish I knew why all the fuss over us, though. Grammel shook his head slowly. You impress me, the two of you. I really wish you'd tell me who you are, and what this is all about. He reached into a pocket and pulled out the little box containing the splinter of Kyber crystal. But I don't suppose that you will, he concluded with a sigh, replacing the box in the pocket. As my hands are now tied, I can't force it from you the way I'd like to. I must admit that whatever Governor Esada sees in you two escapes me utterly. An Imperial governor. Leia had slumped, was backing away and breathing unevenly, both hands going to her face. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Grammel was studying her intently. Yes, why should that bother you so? He glanced sharply at Luke. What's going on here? Ignoring him, Luke moved to comfort the princess. Take it easy, Leia, it might not mean anything. Imperial governors don't take an interest in common thieves, Luke, she whispered tightly. Something was clutching at her throat. I'll be interrogated again, like that time. She broke away, threw herself up against the back wall of the cell. That time back on the Death Star. Small black worms crawled through her brain. Another governor's demands, the now dead Grand Moff Tarkin, the machine drifting into her holding cell. The remorseless black machine, illegal, concocted by twisted Imperial scientists in defiance of every code, legal and moral. It drifted over to her, moved down, metal limbs preparing to perform efficiently, emotionlessly, in response to inhuman programming. Screaming, screaming, screaming never to stop she was. Something hit her hard. She blinked, turned to see Luke looking at her, worried. She slid down to sit up against the wall. Hin had ambled over. The massive, black-eyed Yuzum bent solicitously over her. One long arm went to touch her curiously, the long flexible snout sniffing at her. "She'll be okay, Hin," Luke told the alien in its own language as he helped Leia wipe away cold tears. "Just the Empire's reputation for cruelty," he called back to Grammel. The explanation sounded lame even to his own ears. Grammel pressed up against the bars again. "She's been through questioning before. She knows something," he insisted excitedly. "Who is she? Who are you two? Tell me." He pounded on the bars with a fist. "Tell me." Then his tone turned sly soft. "Maybe I can intercede on your behalf with whomever the Imperial representative is. I want everything I can get out of this, you hear me? You two will be my ticket off this lost world. I want off, and I want the promotion Asada promised me, and I want more if I can get it. Tell me who you are, what you know. I'll bargain with you. Give me something to use, some information to trade with, so I won't meet your Inquisitor unarmed." Luke gave Grammel a pitying look. "Who are you?" Grammel screamed furiously, furious at his own helplessness to do anything but beg, an action he was unaccustomed to. "Why are you so important to him? Tell me, or I'll have the woman dismembered before your eyes in spite of what Asada ordered. Tell me, tell me, tell me, UNK." An enormous paw had shot through the bars and had Grammel by the throat, almost. With a desperate effort, the captain's supervisor barely managed to pull free. Another paw reached after the first. An alert trooper had dropped to one knee and fired his rifle. Even though it was set for stun, the bolt which caught Key in the side sent the Yuzum tumbling across the floor. A scorched black streak showed on the thick fur. Key rolled over, holding the burnt place, panting softly and staring through the bars. Hin moved to his injured companion and checked the wound, also glared frighteningly out at Grammel. Then he moved to the bars. Grammel stood just out of the long reach, not smiling, as Hin lunged for his throat. A huge hand flailed at the air centimeters away while the captain's supervisor massaged his neck. The Yuzum grabbed the bars, pulled in opposite directions, straining. Looking on with academic interest, Grammel reassured the sub-officer standing next to him. "There's no more danger, Pudra. They can't break those bars. Not a dozen Yuzum could." Despite this confidence, it seemed that Hin, with a supreme effort, actually did bend one bar slightly. Then he gave up, gasping deeply. Holding the bars and shaking with rage, he gave Grammel a stare of naked hatred. Grammel sighed a little in spite of himself. "See, I told you," he confided to the sub-officer. "You're all right, Captain Supervisor," the man inquired from behind his armor. "Fine now, Pudra," he assured the subordinate. He made a show of wrinkling his nose. "Except for the smell, of course." He spoke easily to Luke. "You two must be special. Anyone who can stand the odor of a Yuzum." He made a face, shook his head in mock astonishment. To exist in that stink for more than a few minutes requires some special quality. Hin obliged by howling madly at the captain's supervisor. "Go ahead and rage," Grammel told Hin pleasantly. "As soon as I can convince the mine director that you two aren't worth the risk of rehabilitation for work, I'll disassemble you personally. After having you thoroughly deodorized, of course." He turned to leave. As he did so, Hin made a strange sound. It was followed by a forceful thud from the long snout. The huge blob of spit struck Grammel on the back of the neck, just above the high collar. Wiping it away, the captain's supervisor growled viciously back over his shoulder. "You grinning travesty of a man. Soon, very soon, I promise." He gestured sharply to the troops, and they disappeared in a body up the corridor. Hin left the bars, walked back to check on the princess. She had fainted and Luke was supporting her with one arm. A grumble and Luke commented knowingly. "Yes, he's a prince, our jailer, isn't he?" By way of reply, Hin picked up a piece of gravel from the floor. Rolling it between two long fingers, he pulverized it effortlessly and let the dust trickle back to the ground. "I hope you can do that to him someday, Hin," Luke agreed, eyeing the Yuzum. "Right now, though, I'm afraid our chances of getting out of here, let alone of getting to the captain's supervisor, aren't very good." A moan, and the princess reached out toward Luke. He caught her hands and she opened her eyes in surprise. An uncertain glance, then she saw the huge-eyed Hin staring at her curiously. "I'm sorry, Luke." He helped her to her feet. The thought of going through an Imperial interrogation again. "I lost control." "That's understandable. You won't go through another session. I'll see to that." She smiled at him. Why discourage such confidence with mere facts? Luke had moved to the single window, was testing the bars with exploratory pulls. "They're just as solid as they look," he grunted. "No way out of here." "The Yuzum probably already tried that," she pointed out reasonably. A small section of stone wall slid aside and she jumped. A reassuring rush to the wall from both Yuzum caused Luke to relax. Several bowls and dishes of something steaming were slipped into the cell on smooth metal trays before the stone panel slid back into place. Hin and Ki left no doubt as to the contents of the dishes. They grabbed one apiece and started wolfing down the contents. "I don't think much of Yuzum table manners," Luke observed. "I think if we want something to eat, we'd better hurry or they won't leave us a thing." Exchanging glances, they studied the contents of the two remaining trays. Luke sniffed of the contents of one bowl, shrugged, and tried a spoonful. Some kind of stew, he decided. Not bad for prison fare. "Remember," Leia said, "Grammel's under instructions to keep us healthy. Until the Imperial governor's representative arrives." Luke paused between mouthfuls to venture hopefully, "At least if we do get a chance to escape, we'll be able to do it on a full stomach." Luke finished his meal, rose and walked over to the bars forming their cell. He stared down the corridor at the distant spot on the stone wall where the cell entry control was emplaced. Leia eyed him quietly. If only they could cover the recessed photosensitive switch with something, he mused. His gaze traveled around the cell. The trays on which their food had appeared were smooth, unmalleable metal. No way to attach them to one another. The result wouldn't be nearly long enough to reach the far-off switch anyway. And it was, self-evidently, well out of the extended reach of the two Yuzum. "We've got to get a hand or something over that switch," he muttered in frustration. "Or something, Luke boy." Everyone started at the unexpected voice, especially the excitable Yuzum. Hin rushed toward the window but Luke, fortunately, got there before him. "No, it's a friend, Hin." The Yuzum gibbered and clacked at him, but finally moved away. Luke rushed to the opening himself, grabbed the bars and stood on tiptoe to look out. A wrinkled, smiling face stared brightly back at him. "Hela," he almost shouted. "You didn't forget us after all." He tried to see past her. "What about 3PO and R2-D2? Your droids are fine, boy. As for me, I never forget a partner. Besides, I need you too. So don't go emotional on me. It's the crystal I'm after." Her grin faded and she stared hard at him. "Did you tell that maggot Grammel anything about me?" "No," Luke assured her. There was a cough and he noticed the princess staring at him. "Well, not exactly," he corrected himself. "He thinks we were trying to sell the crystal fragment to you." Hela chuckled. "So that's why I wasn't brought in for questioning. Grammel always did see things through the wrong end. He's taken the fragment, I guess." "I'm sorry." Luke looked downcast. We couldn't do anything about it. Never mind, boy. We'll have the whole crystal soon. Soon's we get you out. How? You've got something to blow the wall. Now, that would be a waste of time, boy. What would you do, run away from here? She paused, realization striking. Say, I'll bet you can't see down out of this window, can you? No, only in a straight line, Luke admitted. Boy, I'm standing on a ledge about 10 centimeters wide, over a 40-meter deep trench. There's a barrier on the other side that would detect any energy weapons or explosives anyone tried to carry over here. Or did you think I was pressing this close to the wall because I like the way your breath smells? Hela, you're crazy. What if you slip? I'll make a small splash, Luke boy. As for the first, since everyone seems so sure I'm crazy, I don't see any harm in acting like it. Only a crazy old woman would come sliding out on this little bitty ledge here. That means you couldn't negotiate it. No, boy. The only way out of here is back the way you came. A loud, exuberant grunting sounded behind Luke. Hin came over, put a hand on Luke's shoulder and eyed Hela imploringly. Then he and Luke engaged in a rapid exchange of grunts. Hin walked back into the cell and commenced a low dialogue with Key while Hela looked on uncertainly. What was that all about? She asked Luke. I don't understand that monkey talk. Hin told me, Luke translated for her, that if you can get us out of the cell, Key and he will take care of getting us out of the building. You think they can? Hela wondered, licking her lips. Luke looked confident. I wouldn't want to bet against a pair of desperate Yuzum. There's something else. If we help them escape, they'll help us in the hunt for the crystal. A help they'd be, Hela admitted readily. And I can see why they'd throw in with us. Once they break jail, they've no hope of leniency from Grammel. How are you going to get us out of here? Hela adjusted her precarious stance above the sheer drop, then said proudly, I told you I was a master of the Force. Stand aside, young man. Not knowing what to expect, Luke did as he was told. The princess folded her arms and looked skeptical and anxious simultaneously. Hela's eyes closed and she appeared to enter some kind of trance. Luke felt the stirring, knew that she was manipulating the Force in a way he could never manage well. Not necessarily in a superior fashion, just different. His greatest concern was that in her altered condition she might lose her grip on the temple's exterior. But she remained in place as if frozen there, her brow contorted as she strained. He heard a gasp, and he spun around to look where the princess was pointing. One of the metal food trays had risen, drifted lazily in the air of the cell. It began moving toward the bars. Luke looked back at Hela. It was a simple parlor trick, but one he could never have duplicated. Levitation was not a skill he had mastered very well. But it seemed to be the one thing Hela could do. He remembered the spice shaker on the tavern table, and held his breath. Sweating, her face twisted with the effort, Hela moved the tray. It thumped against the bars. Luke winced, thinking it might be too wide to squeeze through any of the openings. But the tray turned, angled to match the bars, and slipped through with a slight scraping sound. Fluttering, it continued drifting up the corridor. Hela was hardly breathing now, her entire being thrown into the tremendous effort she was making. Luke watched as the tray dipped, rose to its former height, dipped again before continuing on up the corridor. Boy, came an echo of the old woman's voice, you got to help me. Her eyes were still closed. I can't, Hela, he told her tightly. I'm no good at this. Got to, boy. Can't hold it myself much longer. Even as she finished, the tray dipped, struck the ground with a clang before rising once again. Luke shut his own eyes and tried to concentrate only on the tray, ignoring the cell, the princess. Everything but that floating flat plane of formed metal. A familiar voice seemed to remind him of something. Don't try so hard, Luke, the voice said. Remember how I taught you. Relax, relax, let the Force work through you. Don't try to force the Force. Letting other thoughts leak into his mind, pleasant thoughts, Luke strove to comply. A general sense of well-being flowed through him and he smiled. The tray lifted firmly to its former height, continued on up the hallway at a rapid pace. The princess switched her gaze constantly from Luke to Hela and back. Striking the corridor wall, the tray commenced bumping along it. It finally reached the recessed control, turned itself flat to the wall and covered the depression. A very faint click sounded. An open ellipsoid appeared in the middle of the cell bars. Hela let out a long, slow sigh and wavered, almost falling. She caught herself as the tray plunged toward the floor. Hin and Ki gasped, as did the princess. Luke leaned forward, his brows lifting sharply. Something caught the tray barely a centimeter above the hard stone floor and lowered it gently, and silently, the rest of the way. First through the gap were the two Yuzum. The princess followed immediately behind. Once clear, she turned and called to Luke. "What are you waiting for? Come on." But Luke was back at the window. "Are you all right, old woman?" "I will be," Hela quipped, her face still showing the strain, "if you don't call me that too often." "Couldn't have done it without your help, boy. Your control is good." "Not as good as your guidance," he responded gently. "You showed me the way. I've been lucky. I've had good teachers." She reached through the bars and patted his hand. "You're kind, Luke boy. There's a big landspeeder garage and maintenance yard nearby. You turn right as you exit this mausoleum and pass some prefab administrative coops. Continue on until you hit a small adjusted stream. Turn right again, follow the stream. You'll pass a few more, larger buildings. Eventually you'll reach the depot. The garage is the big structure on the immediate left. I'll meet you there with your droids." "What happens when we get there?" "Happens? Why boy, we've got to steal a landspeeder or crawl high. Or do you think we're going to walk to the crystal? Not on this planet. See you there." "Right," Luke acknowledged. "Hurry up, Luke," the princess was calling to him, expecting a flood of troops at any moment. When he didn't reply, she rushed back into the cell, grabbed one arm and pulled. He came willingly, still glancing back toward the window Hela had already abandoned. A loud commotion sounded ahead and Luke made worried noises. "What's wrong?" the princess asked, trying to see around corners in front of them. "It's the Yuzum. Sounds like they're having fun," she demurred, after an especially violent crashing echoed down the corridor. "We ought to be trying to sneak out of here quietly." A subtle Yuzum. "You might as well wish for a squadron of Y-wings," she snorted derisively. She picked up the tray and passed it over the cell lock, then slipped it back inside the bars. "That should give them something to think about," she announced with satisfaction. "Let them think we dematerialized the bars. It won't bother Grammel, but it might make some of his troops uneasy. I want anyone trailing me to be as nervous as possible." Together, they started up the corridor. Hin and Ki were waiting around the second corner. The first Yuzum was standing over the limp forms of 3 troopers. He was using a droid to beat a 4th soldier to pulp. The droid he was holding by one leg was coming apart at roughly the same rate as the man. Ki had a long armful of weapons apparently taken from the decommissioned troopers. Luke caught a pistol tossed to him, as did Leia, while the 2 aliens armed themselves. Ki promptly assumed a listening pose, turned and dashed toward a far doorway. "No, not now!" Luke protested. Reaching out, he came away with 2 handfuls of brown hair. This did not seem to affect the big alien in the least. "I was afraid of this," he groaned. It took only seconds for Ki to flatten the door and burst inside. They followed. The large room was a communications center, possibly the central one for the whole temple complex. Key was rushing about, firing wildly with a rifle held in one massive hand while using the other to demolish both instrumentation and operators with casual indifference as to whether the target was inorganic or protesting. Luke charged in behind, yelling in Yuz, "We've got to get out of here, Key. Listen to me." No use. The creature was beyond reason. Luke left the room. As he did so, an energy bolt smashed into the wall just above him. Dropping to one knee, he whirled and fired his pistol, dropping an Imperial trooper down a secondary corridor. Leia caught another in the midsection and the remaining pair took cover, firing as they did. "Regulars are beginning to show up, Luke," she shouted. "We can't stay, we've got to get out." "I can see that," Luke shot back nervously. He pressed back against the wall, pushed and shoved at Hin to get his attention. "Come on, Hin, use your head instead of your back for a change." The big Yuzum growled dangerously at him. Luke didn't let that intimidate him. "I know this whole place stinks. I'd like to blow it to hell and be gone myself, but we're just a little outnumbered." Hin bared sharp canines, grabbed Luke by the neck. Luke stared resolutely at his furry visage. Abruptly, the hand moved away and Hin nodded slowly, giving out with an apologetic grunt. "Okay then," Luke sighed. "Go get Key." Another bolt broke stone above them and he turned to return the fire. The hallway was starting to fill with Imperial troops. Luke retreated up the hall, called, "Come on, Leia." Under his covering fire, she ran to join him. Then the two of them covered the alien's retreat. As Key emerged from the communications room, a tremendous explosion shattered the doorframe behind him. Smoke and flame gushed from the ruined portal, singeing back fur, but that helped screen them from the massing troops. Hin had a surprise for Luke and handed it to him expectantly. "My lightsaber. Where'd you find it?" The Yuzum explained that the soldier who'd appropriated it wouldn't need it anymore. Luke refastened the heirloom at his belt as the four of them ran for the front of the building, leaving confusion and blood in equal amounts behind them.